Hey, music colleagues. My name is Dr. Brandon Robinson, and I am the Director of Bands and Assistant Professor of Music Education at Mississippi University for Women in Columbus, Mississippi. And I'd like to share with you today a great lesson that you can incorporate in the first couple of weeks of school and is a great kind of icebreaker for those if you're teaching 9 weeks classes, rotation classes, or whether you've got new students coming in, or maybe you could collaborate with another of the fine arts teachers. This is a great way to bring a number of people together and utilizing several different fine arts specialties. And the lesson is called Listen and Draw. So the first thing that you do is you're going to need access to YouTube or another way to present the music or play the music for your students. You'll need some headphones, so each student would need, that way they can listen to their own music, because they may select, rather than you playing one specific tune, one alteration you could have is have the students pick out of the list, and that way you've got students listening to different pieces of music. So headphones will be very helpful. They'll need some paper to draw on. I would suggest, just typing paper with a variety of colors, markers, pencils, pens. Really be creative. Maybe collaborate with the art teacher and see if you could borrow some markers from them. And certainly a lot of your students will have their own stuff to use as well. So those are the things that you're going to need to get started with this fantastic lesson. Now, step one for the lesson will be to select a piece of music from the list that you as the teacher will provide. So what I would do is I would have a sheet that I would give the students with the document that we're going to have attached to this lesson. The link is going to be embedded in the document, so you can have the student just click on that link, and then it should take them straight to YouTube. If for whatever reason your district isn't allowing the YouTube videos to go through your classrooms or to your Chromebooks or whatever method you may be using, you can certainly find recordings and provide those recordings in a different way. Or instead of letting the students choose, you could pick a number of the, maybe do this lesson several times and just pick a different piece of music each time. So the first step is going to be picking your music, and you need to decide how you want to do that. The second step is to give examples of different kinds of emotions. So for example, happy, excited, sad, scared. Even get some of your students to offer some suggestions and ways that they can incorporate emotion into the specific pieces. And that's kind of what we're going for, is having them be able to recognize and understand those different emotions, and then hopefully be able to pick those up with the music that's going to be played. Next, step three, you will listen to the musical selection. And what I would suggest is that have the students not draw anything while they're listening. Maybe have them that could take a few notes or something like that. The first time through is to just listen. Then maybe play it a second time, or have them listen to it if you've got everybody listening to a different piece. The second time, go ahead and start making sketches of the things that you're going to start drawing. Step four, draw a picture of how listening to the piece of music makes you feel. So think about those emotions that you talked about with the class. And you maybe even want to have a list of those on the board, or certainly on the worksheet that maybe you give the students some options of a variety of emotions. And then have them, as they listen to the piece of music, what kind of emotion was brought out in them. And encourage them, there's not a right or wrong answer. Well, there's not a right or wrong answer with this, because it's their opinion. It's their, it's based on their experience and what their emotion was at that moment when they listened to it. So, there is no, they could listen to it again in a week, and it may elicit a different emotion out of them, and that's okay. And then finally, step five, share some of the students' drawings with the class and have them explain their thought process. So you could have one of the drawings. You could even have an example that you give before you go through this process, and say, I listened to this piece of music, and this was my interpretation, the emotions that I got out of this lesson, and then show them the drawing. So the music that you decide to choose for your students, I think, is very important. I think you need a wide variety of music, maybe some orchestral, some with lyrics, some without lyrics. You can have strings, wind instruments, voice, and because depending on what each student maybe can relate to a little bit better, they may feel more comfortable listening to specific things that either they have done if they happen to be in the orchestra or the choir or the band. They may pick pieces that they have either heard before or might feel more comfortable with. Going in maybe a different direction, if you want to specifically pick the pieces for your students and maybe do this several times in a row and have them draw maybe 2 to 4 different sketches, you could go ahead and select several different pieces. And if you were going to pre-select those, you definitely want to think about variety, thinking about dynamics, timbre, orchestration, style, number of things like that. So I think some great examples of music that you could choose would be maybe Rhapsody in Blue by George Gershwin, Flight of the Bumblebee, Toccata and Fugue in D minor, and then Little Night Music by Mozart, just to name a few. So if you're going to be doing this during one class period, I would suggest maybe breaking the class down into 4 different segments. The first being a 5-minute segment of lesson prep, so kind of explaining about the lesson and what you're going to do. Then the next 10 minutes, listen to the piece. And without distraction, with the headphones on, with their 100% complete focus. Then the bulk of the lesson, the next maybe 25 minutes or so, spend that time drawing the picture. Now, encourage the students that when they're drawing the picture, it doesn't have to be a beautiful drawing that you would frame and post somewhere. Literally, it could be abstract. It could be colors. It could be shapes. It could be, utilize the student's creativity with those emotions, because the way I hear a piece of music may be a little bit different than the way you hear a piece of music, and the emotions that we think about or are portrayed through that. And certainly the way we would draw that, because where we may have and feel very comfortable with the musical aspect of this, the point is to kind of get some other creative opportunities through bringing out emotions in music and then actually putting that to page and to picture. And that's where maybe you could collaborate with your art teacher and have them come in and make some suggestions too. But giving them an example of something that you listened to and you drew that doesn't necessarily, look like a beautiful painting or picture, I think would be a great idea. That way, they won't feel self-conscious about not being able to draw, and I certainly can't draw, but I can express what I'm feeling through maybe shapes or colors, express it that way. And then finally, after you draw it, spend the last 10 minutes giving some examples and get some of the students that feel comfortable to come up and say, this was the piece of music that I listened to. And if everybody didn't get a chance to hear that piece of music, maybe play a little excerpt from that piece, and then have them show their work and have them explain what it was, why they drew what they drew, what emotions they felt while listening to the piece of music, and then how they incorporated that in the drawing. So I wanted to share some examples of some work that was done based on a few pieces of music that I suggested for a guinea pig for me to show you. The first piece of music was Clair de Lune by Debussy, and this was the example that they drew. As you can see, there's a little bit of color to it. Looks like a man and a woman getting married. Happy time. And that was their example of the emotions they felt when listening to the Debussy. And then one other example, I played Flight of the Bumblebee, and this was the example. Very different. You can kind of see more of like a newspaper or a comic. So the first one says, come on, come on. Second one says, arg, it's frozen again, the computer. And you can look toward the bottom. It says, no, help, help, deadline in 14 minutes. Then I quit. So you could think about the emotions that this person felt when they were listening to that piece. You could tell, obviously, 2 very different drawings. and two very different types of pieces and emotions when listening to that. All right, so here's a few tips to have a really successful lesson on listen and draw. First, you could collaborate with your art teacher. They probably got some supplies that would be very helpful for you. And certainly they would have a different perspective from the drawing side that could kind of help bring out some more options for your students. Next, have a personal example to share with the students. So that way, and you could even do this in front of them for that matter. Play a piece of music, draw it in front of them and show it. Or you could go ahead and have a piece already drawn if you're worried about time and share that with the students. Giving them that personal example, I think, will really help toward the success of this lesson. Next, use a variety of colors, pencils, pens, or markers to make the drawing. I think the more creative, the better. And let your students loose to do anything and everything they want to as far as making that drawing. And then finally, remind them that the drawings don't have to be elaborate. Just simply match the emotions felt and put those emotions on paper. So here are some options for maybe future lessons based on what you guys did with the listen and draw lesson. You could select a different piece of music than they did before and just repeat the lesson. So simply they could just do the exact same thing again based on a different piece of music. Maybe have students pair up and each of them pick a piece of music and then swap and then see how their drawings compare or maybe contrast. Next, select a drawing from each of the musical selections. So say you've listed 8 pieces for them to pick from. So pick a drawing from all 8 of those selections and have the students match the title and composer to the drawing. So you show the drawing and see if they can pick out of the 8 pieces that they were to choose from, see if they can match the piece with the emotional drawing. Then have the students discuss their decision-making process. So the student that drew that will see how many students in the class were right, and then have that student talk about why they drew what they drew. And then finally, instead of drawing a picture, maybe have the students write a short story describing the emotions and the music. And you can incorporate certainly your English teachers in that. So instead of taking the drawing approach, make it into prose. And maybe you could collaborate with the English department and make a lesson there.